Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We welcome all our guests from all over the world that have decided to tune in to Peace TV today to watch this series of Dawah Ilallah and how to study the sciences of how to call people to Islam using comparative studies. And so what we have been doing in the last few episodes is finding ways that we can not only change others but change ourselves. And how to be effective in our dawah when we call people to submit to Allah by understanding sometimes simple things that we look over, like our culture. We assume that when we are doing dawah that it's the same type of dawah ilallah to everybody. But it depends on the cultural perspective of the person you are speaking to, how they're going to understand what you are saying. We said that something simple as prayer can be seen in totally different lights, depending on whether you're from the East or you're from the West. In the West, it is more, I want to learn from God and I want to be corrected. Where in the East, it can be more of a spiritual aspect to it, where it is simply recitation, calming, meditative. But we need to understand that when we explain to people to check that neither of them have gone to the extreme in the interpretation of it. Martin Luther, who was the reviver of the Protestant movement, understood that prayer was whipping and beating and bruising and cutting himself. That's how he thought he would find closeness. There are still people today which we call Calvinists within Christianity, who believe that if you die with one sin in your life, no matter how many good deeds you did, no matter how devout a Christian you were, no matter how much you loved God, you're going to burn in hell forever, just because of one sin. There are Calvinists who believe that. Obviously they're extremists, but they believe that. So they've taken the interpretation from a cultural perspective. Then you have people in other countries, especially from the East, who think that it's all so easy. And so they've taken a few mantras that they say every morning, but they've missed the point. They've actually missed the boat. The boat has left the harbor and they still think they're on time. So we've got the two extremes. We have to make sure that from a cultural perspective that we understand these exist. And if we had to have a ruler, everything in our life is linear. Linear means straight line. Everything, except no exception in this life. So everything fits into a category from 0 to 30, just for argument's sake. We could take it to 10 billion if you like, but for argument's sake, we'll just say from 0 to 30. That's everything that we experience in life. Food, diet, sport, marriage, wife, children, everything fits on that line. We all slide up and down that line all the time. We need to find a spot where we should be, moving up and down. So in the same way with these two different extremes, we need to find a balance with them. Sometimes somebody who comes from an Eastern perspective, in the beginning he might need a more closer to the 30 in the beginning, just to pull him away from his idea that everything is just so easy. And when somebody from the West is coming in, maybe you need to pull him right down to like 3 or 4 on the scale to become more spiritual, just so that he doesn't become so hard. And then there needs to be a happy medium eventually. So you have to keep an eye on this. You have to look at it yourself even in your own life. See, where am I going? Am I up at the top here or am I at the bottom there? Or am I doing it the way Allah expects me to do it, having an understanding? So culture is very, very important for us to understand on something as simple as that. Today we live in a world of spiritual materialism. You know, sometimes we talk about physical materialism, but there's a spiritual materialism. People are competing to see who could be more sanctimonious and who could be more spiritual than another. I was driving the other day in a car, and the motor vehicle in front of me was a sticker and said that God has no form except in this man. And there was a picture of some new guru that now he's God. God has no form and no shape except in this man. And they had a picture of this. So there's people all claiming that, you know, they're gods. People are trying to compete with spiritualism. Who can be more spiritual than the next? Television is full of these charlatans who claim that they can see ghosts and expel ghosts and do all sorts of things, trying to be more spiritual than the person next to them. or the guy down the road, or the church across the street, or some person who's misunderstood what Islam is all about. In my country, we get these little stickers that put on your car windows. And it says, contact Musa Ali. He will resolve your problems in your marriage life and financial problems and everything. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. So everyone's in this spiritualism, fighting to who can be. So we're living in a spiritual materialism age. So we have to be cautious. Just like there is materialism in this world where people focus more of their attention on the physical than the spiritual. Some people who focus everything on the spiritual, nothing on the physical. So there's a saying I often like to say, that some people are so spiritually minded, they are no earthly good. We were put on planet Earth for a reason. You know, some people, they don't do dawah because they are too busy with their own spiritual discovery of self-discovery. And therefore, nobody else matters. Nobody else is important. We must have a balance. We must be very, very cautious of this. So people are taking, you know, the ego to the extreme and trying to force their own spirituality on other people. And so what they've done is, we find there's a very sad combination here of ego and spirituality somehow being forced together. You've seen them, you know them, and you look and you just feel there's something wrong here. They are so full of themselves, how proud of what they are. The ego is so gigantic, there's no room for Allah in their lives. And then they want to impart spiritual mysteries to you. That person should be humble. They should look and emulate the prophets. Allah be pleased with all of them. Look at their lives. Look how they behaved. Did they have this idea that they need to become, you know, spiritual gurus? Somebody must do everything for them. They do nothing for themselves anymore. I went to the Islamic Research Foundation today, as I said, and I went and I was humbled how small it is. Some of you might think there's this gigantic palace in India where Peace TV comes from. And there's this gigantic, huge, massive building where the Islamic Research Foundation is. You see humbleness. You don't need big, massive 3 stories of a building, big, massive signs to do the work of Allah. You just need faithful people. You just need committed members. Yes, yes, I know people are going to say, because the properties are so expensive, they could have found a cheaper area, but they chose not to. Money was rather to be spent for more important things. And this is a lesson for perhaps maybe have a Muslim organization in your country, and you just got wasted space. You're sitting there with 3, 4 stories in a building, and you've got places that have been turned into museums, so that when fundraisers come visit your building, you can show them your museum. And what actually gets used? 5–10% of that building. The rest is just there for fundraising. It's a gimmick. We have to be serious if we are Muslims. We can't play games. We're going to be held accountable for that. You need to utilize your space properly. So we have to be very cautious of what we are doing as Muslims. If you are claiming to be a dawah organization or da'is or whatever you want to call yourselves, whatever term you want to call your institution or yourselves, you must make sure that you are doing it for the sake of Allah, not for name, claim, and fame. I was humbled. It gave me a lot of things to think about when I go back to South Africa. A lot of things to think about. When I went, every space is utilized. There is no wasted space. And it runs like a smooth machine. I encourage you, if you come to India, go visit IRF. It'll change your thinking, inshallah. So we live on planet Earth, and we live in this body, and our body has, in a way, a mind of its own. Our body does things sometimes. They call it body memory. If you play sports, if you play golf, if you fencing, if you go horse riding, whatever sport you have, you will know exactly what I mean when I talk about body memory. Your body remembers stuff. You stop even thinking you're doing it. If you want to know if your body does things on its own, watch when somebody throws something to you when you're looking somewhere else. What do you automatically do? You go, you didn't even see it, but your body picked it up. Your mind saw it and immediately gave your body a message, which it did without you even having any control of what you just did. It's called body memory. So you could say your body is thinking. And so we have to understand that there is a code that our body runs on. We have to continuously train it so that it has body memory. So when we are teaching someone to become a Muslim, those who practice upon submitting to God, that person who's practicing to submit to Allah, he needs to learn body memory. So it doesn't become something he has to work at, something that he does. But again, we've got to look at that scale. Be cautious. Don't let it all be about actions. And don't just be about sciences and hard stuff. You must keep that scale balanced on what you're teaching them. Let's take a break. When we get back from the break, we'll continue, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're going to continue talking about, inshallah, about culture and how it influences the work that we're doing. We're talking about now how people can see the body in a different way. Some cultures, it's all about the body. Everybody concentrates on how, well built they are, how much exercise, how much clothing they're going to put on it. Everything's name branded. Go to America. Not all the Americans. There are wonderful Americans out there who don't do this, but a lot. It's about standing in a salon and spray painting your body so that you look browner than the brownest person on this planet. And they actually come out of this tanning salon, look like red. They don't even look brown. And they somehow think that's beautiful. That somehow they think that's attractive. And they have people who spend $1,000 on a shirt. This is how we live. Some people live like that. They're only worried about their physical appearance, the physical body. Everything is about the physical. And you have other people from other cultures that they don't care at all about their physical appearance. Again, we have to understand from a cultural perspective where they are. So when we're calling people, don't force your own cultural understanding onto them when they're not ready for it at this point. There are certain requirements in Islam that we need to do physically, but he may not be ready for all of that in one day, or even 1 year even. There's a period of time. He's living in a period of time where he's got to learn things from stage to stage. Not force it on him the first day he becomes a Muslim or she becomes a Muslim. Sometimes those things can come much later. There are far more important things, but you have to understand from a cultural perspective. In South Africa, the Indian community, when somebody reverts from the Caucasian community, white community, they don't tell them about istinja. They just don't. Nobody has done it up to this point. Because they somehow feel they can't tell them. Because somehow there's a cultural barrier there. But they must. Somewhere along the line they must talk about it. So we understand there are cultural barriers that people have put up, whether they're real or imaginary, that need to be dealt with. And from a cultural perspective, understanding, there's no difference between one culture and another. There's no difference between an Arab and a non-Arab. We have to understand that. Even though there are no differences, there are cultural barriers that we need to get over. There are hurdles that we need to train ourselves at getting over. If I had to travel around the world as I do and talk and worry about cultural barriers, I'd have never left South Africa. I would still be there. You've got to learn to respect cultures, but you've also got to be prepared to move through it. Like I spoke a few weeks ago about there are different ways in shaking hands. There are different ways in dress in each culture. Before I go to those countries, I have to do a brush up on what those cultures accept and don't accept. Am I allowed to do this? Can I take both hands? Can I not take both hands? What clothing must I wear? What colors are acceptable? I went to a shop today, the funniest thing ever. They didn't think it was funny, but I thought it was hysterical. And I tried to get a top, a shirt, just a normal, like the Pakistani style, Indian style too. Just a normal top. And all of them have got silver and gold embroidery and little shiny things on them. And I said, don't you have anything plain? And the man looked at me like I was mad. What do you mean plain? What's wrong with you? I said, don't you have something like this, normal? And he went, why? Why would you want normal? But you see, from his cultural perspective, it's unheard of to have such boring colors. And he said, but all the Muslims wear it. And I'm like, well, I'm not from here. If I go back to my country with those things, they're going to think I'm crazy. Because from a cultural perspective, it's different. So we have to get over those obstacles. Eventually, I walked out with something that was a compromise of the two. Not like a Christmas tree, and not like so plain that the guy was upset. The salesman was like, I'll even pay for you to take the stuff. Just take something. You can't come to the shop and walk out, you're disgracing my business. You have to take something. So eventually compromise. Inshallah, maybe you'll see it on Peace TV. But I'm a very simple person. But culture is very different and sometimes quite complicated to make your way through. So you have to learn what will offend somebody and won't offend somebody. You don't want to offend people, but you also don't want to compromise your standards. Another interesting thing that we can look at culture to show you how important culture is the lifespan of different cultures. People say, oh, that's got nothing to do with culture. Yeah, it does. Our culture tells us whether we should die now or not. Obviously, Allah chooses the exact moment for everybody. But what we do is certain cultures will say, well, I've just turned 45. I need to start unwinding now because I die in like 10 years. That's what we tell ourselves. People in certain countries, 55 is death time. You die. This is what our culture has told us. This is what we believe. Other cultures, they get to 55 and goes, another 10, 15 years and I might retire. And then I'll go climb Mount Everest because that's what their culture tells them. It's called ageism, where you get to a point and you go, oh, well, I'm that age now. I'm supposed to get sick. I'm not supposed to be able to do anything anymore. And we tell ourselves this. And we start convincing ourselves that we are no longer any use. A study was done in an institution in Canada where they took two groups. It was done by the Catholics. Very, very interesting study. Where they took a retirement village, Catholic retirement villages, where they had priests and nuns that were now no longer priests and nuns anymore because they were too old, according to society. So they're in their 60s, 60, 65. One was given the normal treatment that Catholics are given once they retire. Like normal retirement villages and homes. Someone comes, teach you to weave. Someone comes, teaches you go like this, put your hands up, like you see them doing. Nothing exciting. Just the normal routine that you see in every retirement village throughout the world or old age home. So they tried a different one. And the second one is they brought lecturers in to the second group and taught them something new. Maybe a new language, maybe something about religion, whatever it is. They entertained their brains more than letting them do this and put beadwork and whatever. This group started to score higher marks in everything. They started becoming physically more capable of doing things for themselves. They started becoming more active. They started even wanting to leave the village because they felt that they were more productive in society. What did they do with these people? They suddenly told them, you're not dead yet. You're still alive. And so they suddenly realized, hey, I am still alive. I can still learn stuff. And they started to score better on everything. Where this group was exactly the same as we find everywhere in the world. They just started to degrade. Even though these people, some of them had Alzheimer's, some of them had problems with their liver, some of them had problems with their hips, they still scored better because their minds were told, get out of this cultural trained understanding of where you're supposed to be. If you're at home and you're 45, 50, 60, there's no reason for you to give up now and say, oh, well, it's over. I've done it all. Like I said, when I went to IRF, Islamic Research Foundation, and there was this man of 80 years old running the show in his department. He wasn't sitting there going, okay, where's my walker? Oh, it's that time now. I'm 80. I'm no longer any use to anybody. I must sit and watch Days of Our Life, whatever TV program it is, for the rest of my days now, and I'm no more longer any use. He refused to listen to what cultural bias says he should have. So this is very, very important as well. Sometimes we go, oh, this is too old to do dawah to, because he's no longer any use anyway. He's had it. That's ageism. That's worse than racism. There is no age limit to the work of dawah. You are to encourage a 6-year-old to become a Muslim as much as you encourage a 106-year-old to become a Muslim. I heard somebody speaking the other day. I was shocked. A Saudi brother. To just give you show you that cultural differences everywhere. He's 60. And he said, no, he can't learn a new language because he's 60. I said, nonsense. You can learn a new language if you're 90. There's nothing stopping you from gaining anything just because there's a number attached to your age. We often say to people, oh, it's just a number. It's not just a number because our culture dictates to us how we're going to translate what that number means. So stop listening to your cultural bias on what it says to you about your age. You are effective da'i. And if you start to change that thinking, you'll be more productive in your Muslim community. Allah has set the date and the time for your death. Don't try and fast forward it. Many people sit there for 30 years waiting for death to come. They had 30 years to do something. For 30 years, they waited for their number to be called. You are productive until the day you really do die. And that can be on a treadmill, or it can be in a retirement village, or it can be while you're talking to somebody on the street, or it can be in the middle of a football match, as we all know that man that died in the middle of a football match. We know the story. I'm sure it's all traveled around. The whole world has heard that story. So there's a time. Nothing you can do about it. Stop programming yourself into thinking that your culture must override your religion or your belief system. Your culture is there, but control it. Don't believe what it is telling you. So we have to be very cautious when we are working with people, that we understand their cultural perspective, where they're coming from. Encourage people. Say to them, you are worth something. There's nothing better than to tell someone, well done, good job. There's two young boys in Ohio, youngsters. They're 13, 14, 15, somewhere around there. Every time I speak to them, every time I'm around them, I just want to embrace them and say, what a great job you're doing. You're doing such a brilliant job. You see how bold these young men are. They are like the leaders of their community, and the community doesn't even know, because they feel good about themselves. Always lift people up, elevate, they help them to become stronger Muslims, not fake. Must be genuine. They can see when you're fake. And these two little boys, I can't wait for them to finish their studies, when they finish all their studies, because they're going to be great shining stars in the Muslim community. You probably, inshallah, will see them on Peace TV one day. They're great fans of Peace TV. They watch Peace TV all the time. So I'm not doing it because they're watching. I'm doing it because they've got that sincerity. They've got that heart for Islam. And they got it from being encouraged. It's all the time we have for today's show, so you're going to have to join us again, same place, same time. So from me, Areeb Islam, and those in the audience here, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
مشفق متعطف لا ينتهي بالحصر ما أعطاه رب رحيم مشفق